January 9th, 2023 Bethel Board of Education organizational meeting to order. We good, Jacob? Okay, just double checking. Okay, it is 7 p.m. Mrs. Hageman, when you are ready, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Mansfield?
Here.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Here.
Mr. Elam?
Here.
Mrs. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is election of president and vice president. So for the first item of order, I need a nomination for president for the 2023 year.
Ma'am, I would like to nominate Lori Sebastian for president.
Thank you, Mr. King.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue, with the second. Any discussion? Mrs. Sebastian, do you accept?
I will accept.
Thank you. I'm looking at my papers. Any further nominations? Okay, nominations are now closed for president. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman, please call the roll for president.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
I abstain.
Okay, the vote passes at 4 yeas and 1 abstention. And the new president assumes chairmanship of the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield, for all your work this past year. Okay, I will accept nominations for vice president. And I would like to nominate Danny Elam as vice president.
I second.
I'll second. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Okay, I will close the nominations for vice president. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mr. Elam?
Abstain.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't have a copy. Just a minute. I just need to get my mouse. Okay, the next item is we need to appoint standing committee members for 2023. The first one is the OSBA Legislative Liaison. Do we have a volunteer for that?
No,
I'll do it.
you know, probably should.
Okay, Danny. MVCTC Liaison.
I'm happy to do it, but light up you'd like to.
Natalie, you've been doing a great job. I mean, better than I ever did for sure. So if you want to continue, you're welcome to.
I know you're right in the middle of it all, so I just wanted to make sure.
That's fine. You're
Okay.
doing great.
Okay, so Natalie will do the MVCTC Liaison again. Athletic Liaison, or we can rename that Student Activities Liaison is the recommendation.
Yeah. Mr. Crispin had actually, in our agenda meeting, had suggested that we do that since we do athletics, obviously, but we also have a number of activities like music boosters as well, that, and even PTO, that we should probably reach out to and include in some of our communications as well. So we think that Student Activities Liaison might be an excellent change, if the board would agree with that. And I'm happy to do that one.
Okay.
Does this also include the OHSAA? Sorry, OHSAA, the High School Athletic Association, as part of the athletic?
We don't liaise with
We
them
don't
at all.
have
That's
a
Mr.
liaison.
Smith's
Mr.
purview.
Dane. Okay, just wanted to double check.
So Lida will do the Student Activities Liaison. Technology Committee, it says consider suspending until needed.
Yeah, I mean, we've had it on our agenda for a while, and I don't know that we've had one that's a board-appointed technology
it's
committee, have we?
Inactive at this time.
Well, I'd like to make a recommendation that, I was appointed that position last year. I tried multiple times to meet, and then there was a lot going on, especially like in the springtime, we were trying to get Chromebooks and everything ordered. It was kind of a rush, so my recommendation is whoever wants to take that position, we should have that ongoing so we don't get caught off, I won't say off guard, but so we'll be ready in case there's more of a rush or push this year, because if we have, it's good to be preparing and planning in case we have 150 students hit the door in August again. So even if it's not a monthly meeting, maybe every other month. So I'd like to see it continue. That would be my recommendation.
So if we have technology committee, Mr. King, would you be willing to serve as the technology liaison since, okay?
Yes.
Okay. Would that be okay with you, Natalie? To spread things out?
Yes.
Okay. And then facilities committee, at least right now, Danny and I are the board appointed committee members. Is there a reason to change those? Okay. So Danny and I will continue that for this year. Okay. Mrs. Hageman, will you take over explaining the next several since they're more in your arena?
Sure. Item B is authorization for treasurer to request advance withdrawal of funds. It says the treasurer is authorized by the Bethel Board of Education to request advance withdrawals of taxes as necessary from the Miami County Auditor in calendar year 2023. It's just if necessary I have to have your okay to request that the Miami County Auditor send us the tax dollars collected as soon as they're received, rather than having to wait until everything has been collected and sent in one fell swoop. Sort of helps with your cash flow. Need your authorization. Item C is authorization to pay bills. So I do need the board.
Mrs. Hughes, we do the Pledge of Allegiance during the regular meeting, so we'll do that when we get to the regular meeting.
So, Item C is the treasurer is authorized by the Bethel Board of Education to process payment of bills against invoices supported by approved purchase orders with properly submitted vouchers or in accordance with salaries and salary schedules approved by the Board of Education. I will be responsible for ensuring that appropriate allocations are observed and that the total expenditures do not exceed the amount allocated in the appropriations. You guys, the board, will receive a list of bills which has been paid from the from school funds each month, and it will be certified as correct and approved, which the board does every regular board meeting. Actual invoices, statements, and vouchers will be available for inspection if the board would like to see those. Then every year I need your authorization to invest funds. Also need your authorization to process payroll, not to exceed 26 pays during calendar year 2023. And then item F is to set time for regular board meetings and work sessions so that we can get that information out to our community as quickly as possible. I ran through that rather quickly, but we can discuss each one as we need to.
I just want to check on the board meetings. The proposed is the second Tuesday of most months, and the regular meeting is the third Monday. I didn't know if everyone caught that. The reason being Mrs. Hageman will have additional time to get her end-of-month reports done, and hopefully they will be done by the work session instead of at the last minute. So that will give her a little more time.
Not to imply that Mrs. Hageman is slow, of course, but to
No,
imply
no,
that the
no,
first
no.
of the month, or first Tuesday of the month is literally falling on like the first and the second of the month, again, like it did last year, and that is impossible for anyone to close the books on the first of the month and have a report done by that evening.
The only thing I did notice on that is if, I know working on the agenda, I know having the meeting on Friday and then getting it posted in time for us to review everything for the Monday meeting. Might be a little tight. Can that be moved back a day to Thursday? I noticed on the work session, Tuesday, the plan is to work on the agenda on that Friday and get that set. So, there is the extra day there. So I was just wondering for the regular board meeting if it could be moved back to Thursday, depending on your schedule, Lori, moving forward, if that would be any issue, because I do feel like there's a lot of scrambling. I say that's probably not the right word, but on Sunday, it's a lot of preparing and then trying to get ready for Monday afternoon evening meeting and trying to make sure everything's read or reviewed in time, just to give everybody a little more time to get that done over the weekend.
There's advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages to waiting that long to do the regular meeting is hopefully you get all the agenda items, because at least historically, we've had a lot of stuff at the very last minute even added. So that, it doesn't matter to me when we have the agenda review meetings personally, and if people are able, I'd probably do them earlier in the afternoon so Mr. Crispin and Mrs. Hageman could head home. We could do them on Zoom if needed. Because it's just two of us. We just can coordinate whoever that month is, if that's acceptable with everyone. These are guidelines, at least the agenda review is, because we're only coordinating that with two people. The public meetings are a little different.
Right. Just whoever's assigned, get together with you and Mr. Crispin, figure it out.
And I don't always wait for the 4 o'clock or the Sunday or the Saturday, because we can get into draft view as board members. We can go into the draft view and look as it's being developed and, kind of get the thrux of what's happening. And then at 4 o'clock, basically, Mr. Crispin and Mrs. Hageman are committing that by 4 o'clock it'll be fairly solid at that point, and then we have the whole weekend. And then by about 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's pretty solid, and you have all weekend to look it over from there. So
Yeah.
I'm not waiting until Sunday for sure, because I can't on my schedule.
Yeah.
But
Well, I didn't see this week's posted until Sunday, actually.
it's in board docs. It's just not posted to the public.
It's under draft. We'll show you afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there. We have draft view.
Yeah, I know there's a draft view. Perhaps I overlooked it this weekend. But, okay, thanks.
And hopefully, like I said, if she has additional time, the reports will be done at work session time, so then there won't be those last minute ads. And hopefully in 6 months, we'll be pretty well through the construction project. Maybe I'm being optimistic, more like a year, I know, because the bills come in afterwards, but that will make a big difference too to her workload, getting the financials done. And at least in my opinion. Mrs. Hageman, you want to say anything else about that?
No, if the first work day of the month is the 1st, and then we have a board meeting on the 1st or 2nd, sort of hard to close everything out, which takes most of your day, and then create reports. So if we could have the meeting later in the month, that would be easier so that information is available. Legally, we only have to make it available 48 hours in advance of the meeting. So that's according to Ohio Revised Code, but we try to get it out there as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hageman. Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. I would like to move on to item G, board compensation.
I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. King.
It's okay. So on that specifically, where it has that public content on F, it was listed as an individual voted item.
Oh, sorry.
But the question I had was, it says that they'll be held in the high school media center. Do we have to identify the actual room it's in? Currently we're in the Hive versus the media center, or so that it could be moved?
Legally, you
Basically.
do not have to identify the room that I'm aware of. You just have to try and get them to the right location. So you can only have like a list of board meeting dates, right, and times. And then we notify everybody when, where the meeting will be held. But legally, we only have to make a list of dates and times available, as far as I'm aware. Now, if we can't do it in the high school media center, I know it's commonplace to say this is where our location is, we can change it, or if we want to say Bethel Hall, we can change it to the High School Media Center. This is sort of carried over from last year, so whatever the board prefers.
Okay. I was just bringing it up so that it could be more fluid. If we put out the announcement for the board meetings when we know it's coming, we can announce where it is. We could say, or will normally be held in the Hive, or one of those, that's all.
Do we have a preference? I know some members would like to move everything back to the media center just for ease of technology. The one nice thing about having it in here is you can see the agenda and see us at the same time.
Correct.
Well, I
I do
mean,
like that.
the work session is really great, but we're in a little box. Nobody knows who's talking, or at least that's what I've been told. It's very difficult to know who's speaking. I don't have a strong preference either way, but I'm happy to.
I mean, we can leave it blank and just announce each meeting as they come.
Okay.
That's what I would recommend that.
So in general, the work sessions will be the second Tuesday of the month at 5:30, and the board meetings will be the third Monday of the month at 7 p.m. There is a holiday or two in there that it does shift a day, so Mrs. Hageman will post this on the webpage, correct, Mrs. Hageman?
Yes.
So that's under the board information, and it'll be publicly available there. All right.
Madam President, I would like to make a motion to have regular board meetings, the regular meetings of the Board of Education for the calendar year of 2023 to be on the third Monday of each month.
I know there's no public speaking, but I just want you to be aware that, I didn't realize it was moving out, Lee. That second Tuesday is a direct conflict with the trustee meeting. So you're gonna force your community to choose between going to this one or that one. I just wanted you to know.
As I was stating, the regular meetings of the Bethel Board of Education for calendar year 2023 to be held on the third Monday of each month at 7 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, we have Mr. King moving and Mrs. Mansfield seconding. Any further discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes?
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Okay. And did your motion include the work session, Mr. King?
No, I was only going right on the agenda where it
Yeah,
just
I didn't catch
wanted
there
it.
was a separate vote here, but we will vote on everything at the end
Yeah.
during the consent calendar as well. It doesn't hurt anything that we did it twice, but we will fill in the second Tuesday of the month for the work session is what we discussed at 5:30 p.m. Okay. We're on board compensation, is that correct? Item G.
yes.
The Bethel Board of Education establishes board compensation at $125 per meeting for a maximum of 12 meetings per year. The Board of Education Service Fund, is that you or Mr. Crispin or me?
It could be any one of us, but it's probably you or I. I
Go
can go
ahead.
ahead. The Ohio Revised Code provides for the setting aside from the general fund a sum not to exceed $2 per pupil or 20,000, whichever is greater. We have 1,907 students at $2 per pupil. You're looking at about $3,500, which isn't going to cover a whole lot for the board service fund. To be used in paying expenses of members of the board actually incurred in the performance of their duties, or their official representatives when sent out of the school district. So the amount appropriated for the purpose of the service fund at this time is $20,000. primarily that's used for like professional development as you go to conferences, reimbursement for your mileage, and to pay for the conference and training themselves, so.
Okay, can you go ahead and explain item I as well?
Sure. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one here. This is the board's authorization giving the superintendent and the treasurer authorization to hire, to approve employment of new employees and to approve promotion or transfers of employees to higher paid positions between the Board of Education meetings. The board then to take action on the employment, promotion, or transfer at its next meeting. So sometimes, as you know, we need somebody to fill a position rather quickly, and so that gives the superintendent the authorization to place somebody in that position and then get the board's approval after the fact. And it'll have an effective date that says when this individual was indeed placed in that position. Also allows, it says superintendent and treasurer because I have like 3 whole employees, but the rest of them are yours. So to accept employee resignations on behalf of the Board of Education between Board of Education meetings as well.
Yeah, and that's not new.
Nope, that is not new. We did it last year as well.
And then item J is the approval of resolution authorizing the superintendent and treasurer to serve as purchasing agent. You'll notice, I believe we set these limits last year. It's not to exceed $25,000 for general purchases and not to exceed $50,000 for any construction-related expenses. Now, that doesn't cover the K-5 building, which is has been voted on separately, but I just want to mention that. Those are the limits we've set for this year, and those were consistent with what we had discussed last year. Okay. That is correct. Item K is an approval of resolution authorizing legal services provided by John Pajerski, Ennis Britton, and Dinsmore and Scholl LLP. And then item L is OSBA's Legal Assistance Fund for 2023. Okay, I need a motion to place the above items on the consent calendar, please.
I'll move.
Mr. Elam's moved. Can I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. King, for the second. Is there discussion?
I have a discussion topic. When we're discussing the contracts for the purchasing agents, although it allows for not to exceed 25,000, do we have a general number where we have to get at least 3 bids as we step through that versus just picking one company?
Mrs. Hageman, can you answer Mr. King's question on that?
Sure. The board policy states that if it's over $15,000 or more, that we require at least, I think it's, or $5,000.
I think it is.
It's 5, yeah. $5,000 or more, we require additional bids, which, you know, is quite a small number given the cost of items now. I'm used to seeing
Correct.
15,000, I think. But I think right now the policy still states 5,000.
Thank you.
Is that policy something we may need to adjust moving forward?
We may, yeah.
Okay, if you and Mr. Crispin believe that needs addressed moving forward, next time you meet with Neola, why don't you
Yeah.
broach that subject and we can have further discussion.
Is it 15 or 5? Can't remember.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on any of the items? Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes. I need a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll move.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. May I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. King. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hageman, please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
right. Meeting, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. May I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes?
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes?
Mr. King.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned at 7:25 PM. Okay, do we need to take a break, or do you want to go straight into the regular meeting? Move on? Okay. Welcome to...
Mm-mm. Yeah, you have to do a call to order.
Okay, Mr. Watson, can you stop that meeting and start a new feed for us? And when you're ready, please give me the thumbs up.